Hey everyone, Mo here, and before the video begins, I just want to let you guys know that my schedule has opened up for me to do coaching again. So if you're interested in private one-on-one coaching for me to help you, whether you're a newer player and you want to excel at the game very quickly and learn the fundamentals without developing any bad habits early, or if you're an experienced player who's already maybe platinum or diamond and you're top 1%, but you need some help filling in the gap to get you to that 0.01%, to make you just some of the best, then hit me up on Discord and I can get you in some private one-on-one coaching lessons to help you polish up any skills you want to refine and help you learn all of the secrets to becoming a top player. That's it. I hope you enjoy the video. Hey everybody, Mo here, and in this video I'm bringing you guys a deck guide for dummies over the Spider Aggro deck. Now this deck is not new. This deck has literally been around since beta. It was considered the first S tier ladder deck. This was one of the first decks people used when the game very first came out to hit masters and to grind really quickly, because there were a bunch of card restrictions and you got free Elise when you started the game, so it was really fast and easy to build. But the deck has actually come back now that the meta has gotten a lot slower and a lot more greedy. A swarm low to the ground spider deck like this Elise Spider Fearsome Aggro style deck has actually been doing really well for me. I have played over 90 games in 2 days, not because I've grinded a lot, but you actually just play games so fast with this that you don't even realize how many games you play. And I held over a 70% win rate throughout the entirety of these 90 games. My win rate ended up being, I think it's 69.3 or something like that. It's basically 70%, rounded up. And so in this video, I'm just going to go over the newer cards that weren't around. Maybe if you did play this game back in beta, just the new additions to the cards. I'll be going over the purpose of each of these cards, how to play the deck, and then at the end, there will be a complete Mulligan guide, and then there will be a matchup guide in my Discord if you click on the link in the description. So before I get into the video, I wanted to remind everyone that 86% of the people that watch my videos aren't actually subscribed to me. So if you could do me a huge favor and click that subscribe button, it helps me out a ton with the YouTube algorithm, and it means so much to me. So I would really appreciate that. If you change your mind later, you can always unsubscribe. So that's it for the intro. I hope you guys enjoy the video, and let's get on to the video. Alright, now we're going to go over the purpose of each card and why it's in the deck. So we'll start just with the 1-drops and go all the way down to the 5-drops. So we'll start at the top. So Legion, Saboteur, and Precious Pet, and Stygian Onlooker. These are the 3 1-drops that we decided to put in the deck. Saboteur, just because it's a really nice 1 mana 3 damage unit and has the 1 guaranteed damage no matter what, so sometimes you can swing with it just because it deals 1 automatic damage, and that's not nice. Precious Pet, because this card literally cannot be blocked on turn 1, so this is like a guaranteed 2 damage on turn 1 unless your opponent's playing like a go hard or has a way to remove it with a spell. And then our last one is Stygian Onlooker. We played 3 Stygians. It's actually really easy to proc Stygian. And a really big turn that I have, if you're attacking on evens, a good turn is opening with something like a Frenzied Skitterer to remove all of their power by 1, and then to go ahead and play your Stygian Onlooker after that. So not only did you just reduce everyone's power by 1 with Skitterer, but you now have this extra 4/1 over or 4/1 Night Fearsome unit that they weren't expecting to have to block and play against. 2-drop, I mean, we're just playing the standard Spider package here, so we have our 2 mana 3/2 Fearsome Sentry. We have our House Spider. We have our Skitterer. Yeah, House Spider is just a nice 2-drop. It makes us go wide, and it's nice at leveling Elise, but also it's really good with Brothers Bond. So we're playing 2 Brothers Bond, and that's because we're a very low to the ground swarm style deck, and we're only playing 2 because you never really want to draw more than 1 Brothers Bond. Drawing 1 Brothers Bond by turn 3 is usually really good because it turns into 2 mana Decimate. But top decking a Brothers Bond late in the game is probably not what you want to see, and drawing more than 1 Brothers Bond is usually never good. So that's why you only play 2 here. Play Elise because, Fearsome Champion Spider is good. Demolitionist is nice. It's, just 2 mana, deal 2 damage, and it's a body. So this can potentially be a 2 mana Decimate if the play ability goes off and it hits face. Then you just spent 2 mana to deal 4 damage, which is really nice. So a lot of stuff in this deck is just about min-maxing damage. The next thing we have up is Stalking Shadows. This is really good. It's really hard for you to run out of fuel with this deck. And that's because our curve is so low. The reason this deck is so good is because it's super consistent at killing your opponent before turns, 6 or 7. Before other aggro decks usually stall out against things like Star Shaping and just mid-range units. And that's because you have stuff like Stalking Shadows to help you in the late game. most of the time I'm pulling either Doombeast or Skitterer. I very rarely pull anything that's not one of those two, with the exception of like Demolition. Demolition is probably like the third most, and that's just because it's essentially a Doombeast because it deals 2 damage to the enemy Nexus. And that's because these play abilities are insane, and that's why I picked them the most with Stalking Shadows. Like Skitterer, if it's turn 6, you just go Skitterer, Skitterer. Nothing on your opponent's field can block, and now you just get a really big swing with a bunch of fearsome units. And then Doombeast for a nice burn plan / gain some life there. And then our top end with our burn spells is going to be 3 Decimates, 3 Fervors. And this is essentially where our curve stops, is at Decimates. You'll notice that I don't play any Darius, and that's because Darius is actually too slow in this deck. And it would clunk up your draws. I don't play stuff like Crowd Favorite because I think it'd be too slow and clunk up my draws. I never want to have a dead hand, and you'll notice when you play this deck that it's very rare to have like just a completely bricked hand. It's not typically a hand you have because you have so many playable cards at such low mana that by turn 3 you still have like a whole bunch of stuff you can play, even if it's like a Doom Beast. By turn 3, I mean, you have had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 6 even. So 6 times 18 different cards. It's literally half of your deck that you can play as far as units go without the Nightfall trigger. Unspeakable Horror is really nice. This is a very versatile card. Most of the time, I'm using this card to go face, to get that 1 extra damage, and to get more Nightfall units to try and just not run out of steam. But sometimes it can be used for things like popping barriers. It can be used to kill your own unit if you're trying to block a lifesteal unit or something like that. It's very versatile, but like I said, most of the time I use it to go face, because face is the place where a Smork deck. And yeah, a lot of good cards here, a lot of low to the ground cards, and it's very repetitive. As you see, everything here like does damage or has fearsome, so that's a way to like guarantee the damage. So that's why each card is in the deck. So now I'm going to go over your typical curves and play patterns with this deck. Alright, so now we're going to go over what the standard curves look like for this Spider Aggro deck, what a lot of common curves are, and what curves to look out for depending on if you're attacking on odds or evens. So we'll start with whatever the most standard curve, and this is going to be your standard fearsome curve. So this is when you're attacking on odds most of the time, or evens. It just plays out the same. If you're attacking on odds is best, so you play Precious Pet on turn 1, attack. You play any 2-mana fearsome unit on 2. Either this is Elise or Arachnoid Horror. And then on turn 3, you can play any 3 mana worth of units. So this means you can either play another 2-drop and then like a Stygian Onlooker, or you can play a Skitterer. And that's going to be your standard 1, 2, 3 curve. And this will push a lot of damage most of the time, because most of the time, most decks don't play units that can block fearsome units on turns 1 and 2. So whether you're attacking on turn 1 or turn 2, you're usually getting in for somewhere between 2 and 4 damage. Another curve we're going to talk about is the Brothers Bond curve. And this is a curve that I see a lot of people doing correctly. And the curve I'm going to talk about right now is whenever you're attacking on odds, which means you're attacking on turns 1 and 3. And you have a Brothers Bond in your opening hand. So what you're going to do is you're going to pass on turn 1. Even if you have a 1-drop, you want to pass on turn 1. You want to play a 2-drop on turn 2. And then develop a 2-drop on turn 3 before you attack. If you do it this way, then whenever you attack, you should have 2 extra mana left over, 1 spell mana and 1 unit mana, and you should be able to play your Brothers Bond. This curve is really good with Brothers Bond if your hand is something like Elise and a House Spider. If you have Elise, House Spider, then you're attacking with 4 units, and there's no way your opponent's also going to have 4 units to block. So any units that go unblocked, you just Brothers Bond, and there you go. You just played a 2-mana Decimate. You can only do this if you don't play a 1-drop on turn 1. If you're attacking on evens, however, then you can go ahead and play your 1-drop on 1, 2-drop on 2, 3-drop on 3, and then open attack on turn 4 with Brothers Bond and stuff. But this is definitely a lot more powerful when you're attacking on odds and when you have the Elise House Spider type opener. The next one we're going to talk about is your attack when your curve when you're attacking on evens. This means if you're not attacking first and you're attacking on turns 2 and 4. If you're attacking on turn 2, the most powerful attack you can have is a triple 1-drop hand. And this essentially means you play Precious Pet on turn 1 when you're not attacking. It comes to you. On turn 2, you open with Precious Pet into Stygian Onlooker, and then now you're going to hit your opponent for 8 damage on turn 2, which is Like, literally half of their life total. Almost half their life total by turn 2, and that's absolutely insane. A lot of decks cannot come back with that, especially if you just have, like, 1 Decimate. If you draw 1 Decimate by that point, you've done 3/4 of their life with, like, by 2 turns, and it's absolutely crazy. So that's one curve, and then if you're attacking on turn 4, you can essentially have the same curve where you go, you know, triple 1-drop by turn 2. Turn 3, you play, like, anything like an Elise, and then turn 4, when it's your attack turn, you open with a Skitterer, and then with that last mana, you can use to play Stygian. So if your curve looked something like, you know, triple 1-drop, on turn 3, play any unit, and then turn 4, go Skitterer, Stygian, Onlooker, there's, like, very, very few decks that can ever, like, keep up with that, or come back from that type of damage once you do draw your, like, 1 to 2 burn spells. And then the final curve we're going to talk about is, again, when you're attacking on evens. Turn 6, double Skitterer is super strong. This is something I talked about with Stalking Shadows, where with Stalking Shadows, one of the best cards you can get is Skitterer and Doombeast. If you're attacking on evens, a lot of the times, I'll take double Skitterer if it looks like I have a really wide board and I can kill them and my opponent isn't playing too many removal spells or combat tricks. I'll take the Skitterers because you go turn 6, play a Skitterer, your opponent plays a 3-power unit, and then you play your second Skitterer, and then it takes away all 4-power blockers, and it takes away the blocker that your opponent just played. And then while on top of all of that, removing your opponent's blockers, it just buffed up all of your spiders, and most of your spiders are going to have Fearsome, and Skitterer just took away all of your opponent's Fearsome blockers, so this double Skitterer will end up pushing some crazy, like, 14, 15, 16 damage sometimes by turn 6, and that's a really good way to end the game. So those are what the typical curves with this deck look like. Those are the most common curves. And the final part of this video will be mistakes that I see a lot of new players make and habits to not start, bad habits to not get into with the deck. So now let's get into the mistakes and that I see a lot of new players make, and then we'll go over a quick mulligan guide at the end. So a lot of mistakes that I see a lot of players make is not open attacking enough, but also open attacking too much. So you have to find the balance, and this is how you find it. So you have to think to yourself, before you develop, you always have to do a risk to reward function of what are the odds my opponent takes less damage by me developing than my opponent taking on open attack. So this means if you're playing against a deck that plays like no fearsome blockers and you want to develop a fearsome blocker, you have to think, if I spend the time to play this, you know, 2-mana 3/2, can my opponent play a card at slow speed, meaning a unit or a slow speed spell, that would essentially make me deal less damage to them? The whole point of this spider deck is to get the maximum amount of damage possible with your units, so that way you can finish them off with decimates and fervors and burn spells. So you always have to take into consideration, how do I get the maximum amount of damage? Sometimes that's open attacking with the Brothers Bond. Sometimes that's developing another fearsome unit. You have to know what your opponent's deck has in it as far as answers. So once you learn the meta and learn what your opponent has in his deck for answers, whether that's, you know, a fearsome blocker or an avalanche, like a slow removal spell or something like that, then you can make these decisions more often than not. Most of the time, I just go with the mantra of, like, don't be greedy. Like, you don't need to play something like a house spider if neither of the 2 spiders are actually going to attack. You know, like, if your opponent has a bunch of 2/1s in play, there's no reason to play house spiders because you're not attacking with them. They're just going to get blocked by the 2/1s anyways, and you're really sad. You might as well just open attack. But at the same time, if your opponent is playing a very reactive heavy deck, or let's say they're playing a deck that can only play 1 unit at a time, then sure, go ahead and develop, let them play their 1 unit, and then you develop 2 more units. And then even if they block a 3/3 with their unit now, well, as long as you've come up with that 3 damage somewhere else, then you're winning in board development and damage. It's the same damage, except now you have more units in play and you're happy. So that's the mistake, is getting too greedy by developing when you don't need to. And then also, like, missing out on a bunch of damage by open attacking too much. Don't be afraid to develop sometimes with things like Skitterer. The second thing and last thing I want to mention is the biggest thing. Don't use your fervor proactively unless you have to. I'm almost always saving fervor whenever it's either guaranteed to go off or if it's going to deal the most damage possible. This means if you're playing against something like an Aphelios, save your Noxian Fervor for whenever they're about to attack you with a lifelink unit, because you know they're going to Severum something up really big, and they don't have removal spells typically in those style decks, so you wait for them to give something lifesteal and attack you, and then you can go block Noxian Fervor. Because now, not only did you deal 3 damage with your Noxian Fervor, but you stopped them from gaining like 5 life. So you can think about it as this Noxian Fervor is turned into 3 mana deal 8 damage, instead of just the 3 mana deal 3 and then let your opponent gain 8 life, you know? So that's why I say things like try and get as much damage out of your Noxian Fervor and save it for the very last second. Also, you don't want to just pop off with Noxian Fervors and then them go like, okay, well, Mystic Shot you now. Or like, you know, I have a bunch of mana left open, I can just remove your units instead. So I'd always start with Decimates you can use proactively, but only towards the end of the game. The way this deck works is, again, maximizing damage. So you want to start by getting a bunch of damage in with your units, and then once you've done about 10 to 12 damage with your units, you want to end the game with like Decimate, Fervor, Doom Beast, and stuff like that. Like that right there is 4, 7, 8, 9 damage. That's half your opponent's life total and just straight up burn. And that's essentially how this deck plays out, is you swarm them down early for about 10 damage, and then you burn them out for the last 10. So the last thing we'll go over here is Mulligan guides. The Mulligan for this deck is actually fairly simple. The priority for Mulligans is 2 mana Fearsome Unit, 1 drop, and then Skitterer. So, and by 1 drop, the only 1 drop I'm ever really keeping is a Precious Pet, unless I have the other things. Like if you're mulliganing hard for your 2 mana Fearsome Unit. So this means even if your hand is like double Saboteur, Onlooker, I would still mulligan all 3 of those cards away if I don't have an Elise or an Arachnoid Horror. And then after you found one of those 2 Fearsome Units, then you can go ahead and keep your like Precious Pet and your 1 drop and your Skitterer. I keep Skitterer in my hand a lot because I know my curve is going to be like play 1 drop, play Elise, turn 3 Skitterer, boom. That's big damage that your opponent really can't block. Or if you're attacking on evens, you go like play Skitterer, play Onlooker, just like I said in the curves guide, you know, telling you guys how to play your curves out. You know, Skitterer is a really big part of your attacking on 3 curve and your attacking on 4 curve. So that's nice, but don't keep Skitterer in your hand if you don't have a 2 mana Fearsome Unit. If you skip your turn 2 in this deck, you're probably going to lose. So that's why having a 2-drop is super, super, super important. Outside of that, there's nothing else I'm really ever hard mulliganing for. Yeah, it's essentially just hard mulligan for a 2 mana Fearsome Unit, a 1 drop, like, you know, most likely Precious Pet, and then Skitterer. And then just make sure to use your Noxian Fervors reactively most of the time to negate stuff like Lifesteal and stuff like that. And you should be good to go. You just end them out with burn. So that's going to be the end of this video. For those of you that are new and don't know how my formatting works, I'm putting out the deck guide right now, which is this video that you're watching. And then tomorrow, I'll have a video out that'll have, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5 games of this deck. So you can see how I play it, and I talk through, like, my thought process, and you can watch the deck in action and see how it performs. So that's going to be it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave a comment telling me what deck you want to see next in this deck guide series, as well as just any video at all you want to see me make. Hit the subscribe button because it helps me a lot with the YouTube algorithm. Join the Discord and the Discord link below so you get notification on everything, and I'll see you guys in the next video.